My loving audience, take my love and subscribes my channel. What if Heather is not just causing problems, but actually playing a strategic game with everyone around her? Take a moment to consider that possibility. Smitty is getting closer to her, Dani is searching for answers, Tomas is turning to Eva for support, and somehow, Heather still seems to stay one step ahead, but for how long? The amusing thing about this situation is that these stories might appear separate at first. In reality, they are connected. Heather's actions are influencing those around her. Dani's questions could reveal information that others are trying to keep hidden, and Tomas relying on Eva might result in new complications. Let's begin with Heather, because she might be the person everyone needs to pay close attention to right now. Heather isn't simply causing trouble. She seems to understand how people react when they are anxious or uncertain. She knows what sparks curiosity, what causes anger, and she enjoys using these emotions as tools against others. Recent spoilers suggest Heather is playing mind games with Martin and Smitty. Meanwhile, Smitty has been investigating Heather's trail. That is a dangerous situation for Heather if Smitty starts putting the pieces together. But here's the catch. Heather doesn't need to stop Smitty entirely, she just needs to make him look in the wrong direction. Think about it. If someone is investigating you, you don't always need to fight back. Sometimes, giving them just enough information to make them feel like they're on the right track can be enough. Then you sit back and watch them waste time. That might be exactly what Heather is doing. Smitty needs to be cautious, because he really wants answers. That's a good trait for investigation, but it can also be a weakness. When you're determined to prove something, you might start seeing every detail as proof. Heather could take advantage of that. She could give Smitty one clue. Then another, maybe one is real, and the other is completely misleading. Before he realizes it, Smitty might be chasing Heather's story instead of the truth. That's what makes this situation so intriguing. Heather doesn't need to convince Smitty she's innocent. She only needs to keep him confused. And honestly, I think that's where her real power lies. She enjoys being in control. She seems to like watching others react while she remains calm. There's something almost satisfying to her about making people nervous. That tells me this is more than just about keeping a secret. It's also about power. Heather wants to know that she can still control the room. She wants to know that she can make someone change direction simply by saying the right thing. And Smitty may be the first person who refuses to play along. That's where the story could become really interesting. Because Smitty isn't the only one watching Heather. Martin is also involved in this situation. And that's important because Martin brings a different kind of pressure. Smitty is driven by the need for information. Martin has influence, reputation, and connections. If Heather can keep both of them occupied, she gains more time. And time is exactly what someone with secrets needs. But I have to say, I don't think Heather should feel too confident. The more people she manipulates, the more chances she creates for herself to make mistakes. That's the problem with controlling too many people. Eventually, someone will compare notes. One person remembers one thing. Another remembers something else. Suddenly, the story doesn't add up anymore. And that's when the cracks start to show. Now let's talk about Dani, because her part in this story could become much bigger than it first appears. Dani is looking for answers. But her search is interrupted. At first, that might seem like just another setback. But I don't see it that way. If someone is stopped while looking for information, the first question they might ask is, why? And once that question gets into your head, it's hard to let go. Dani might start wondering who wanted her to stop. Was someone trying to protect a secret? Did someone know what she was about to find? Or did she simply get unlucky? I don't think Dani will accept that final explanation for very long. That's when her emotional side starts to play a role. Dani isn't just seeking information out of curiosity. She wants to understand what is happening around her. She wants to know who she can rely on. When people begin to withhold things from you, trust becomes a big issue. You start paying attention to everything. A strange glance. A question that goes unanswered. A conversation that stops suddenly when you enter the room. A person who knows something but refuses to share it. Suddenly, even usual actions can seem suspicious. That's how doubt begins to grow. And Dani already has another reason to be suspicious because of Andre. Reports suggest that Andre has been keeping his knowledge of Heather hidden from Dani, while Heather has been trying to get closer to Dani. Now think about that carefully. Andre knows Heather. Dani doesn't know the full story. And Heather is moving closer to Dani. Do you see the problem? If Dani eventually learns the truth from Andre, she might get very upset. But if she finds out from Heather, the consequences could be much worse. Because then Heather gets to set the story first. And whoever starts the story can often shape how others see it. That's why I think Heather's interest in Dani is important. Maybe Heather wants access to Dani for a reason. Maybe she wants information. Maybe she wants to influence Dani. Or maybe she wants Dani to start doubting the people she trusts the most. And that last possibility is what worries me the most. Because you don't always have to break a relationship completely. Sometimes, you just create a little doubt. That's enough. If Dani starts questioning what Andre has been hiding, she could start doubting other things as well. And once that happens, Heather doesn't need to push very hard. Dani could start questioning things on her own. Now, I understand why Andre might be afraid of Heather. There is clearly a history between them. He may believe that keeping certain things from Dani is a way to protect their relationship. But I don't agree with that choice. Secrets almost always turn out worse when they are finally revealed. Andre may think he's protecting the relationship right now. But what happens when Dani finds out that he knew and chose not to tell her? The question won't just be, what happened? It will be, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me? That's a much harder question to answer. And Heather may be waiting for exactly that moment. She doesn't have to break Andre and Dani apart herself. She may only have to let Andre's secret do the damage. That's why Dani needs to be careful. She can't let Heather decide what she believes. She also can't let her anger make all the decisions for her. If Dani reacts too quickly, Heather could use that. But if Dani stays calm and pays attention, she could change everything. Honestly, I think the best choice Dani could make right now is to stop telling people exactly what she knows. Instead, she should observe. Listen carefully. Wait a moment. Then, she can ask the right question at the right time. Imagine Dani having a conversation with Heather where she already knows more than Heather thinks she does. That would change everything. Heather walks into the conversation thinking she's in control. Then Dani asks one simple question. Heather answers. Dani asks another. Heather hesitates. And suddenly, Dani notices something. That's the kind of moment that could completely change the balance of power between them. Now let's go back to Smitty again. Because if Heather is trying to manipulate him, Smitty has a choice. He can keep reacting to Heather. Or he can start watching how Heather reacts. Those are two very different approaches. If Smitty keeps chasing every clue Heather gives, he might stay trapped in her game. But if he starts paying attention to her behavior, he might notice something important. What makes Heather angry? What makes her nervous? Who does she avoid? Who does she suddenly become friendly with? What happens when someone mentions a certain name? These little reactions can tell you a lot more than a long conversation. If Smitty starts paying attention to the small things, Heather might face a major issue. Because the person she believes she is controlling might begin to understand how she works. That's when the one who is usually in charge becomes the one being chased. I think Heather might already be feeling some stress. The hints show that Heather reacts violently. That's significant. People who feel completely secure don't always react like that. When someone becomes more aggressive, it's often because they feel threatened. Perhaps Smitty has gotten too close. Maybe Martin knows more than Heather anticipated. Maybe Dani is asking questions she shouldn't be asking. Or maybe Heather just feels like her control is slipping. In my opinion, that last possibility is the most intriguing. Because Heather's greatest strength is her ability to control situations. So what happens when she loses that control? That's when we may finally see what Heather is really capable of. Now let's change the subject and talk about Tomas. Because while Heather is trying to manage others, Tomas appears to be searching for someone he can rely on. And that person is Eva. At first, this might seem harmless. Tomas is under a lot of pressure. Eva listens. He needs support. She gives it. Simple, right? Well, not in this show. Nothing here remains simple for long. Tomas has been dealing with a lot, especially with his complicated situation involving Naomi and the professional issues connected to Bill. So when Tomas finally turns to Eva, I don't think it's a random decision. I believe it shows us something about how he is feeling. Sometimes people don't need someone to solve their problems. They just need someone who will listen. Maybe that's what Tomas is getting from Eva. Maybe he feels like he can be open with her. And if that's true, then Eva could become emotionally important to him. But here's where I think problems might start. When you keep going to the same person every time you're upset, that person can gradually become your emotional refuge. And once that happens, feelings can get complex. That doesn't necessarily mean romance. I actually think it would be more interesting if the show allows their relationship to develop naturally. Maybe Tomas just needs a friend. Maybe Eva genuinely wants to help. But what happens when Naomi notices? That's the real question. Because Naomi might not care about every conversation Tomas has. But if she realizes that Eva is the person he goes to when things get tough, she may start asking questions. Why Eva? Why are you telling her things you don't tell me? Why do you feel more comfortable with her? And even if Tomas hasn't done anything wrong, those questions can create tension. That's what makes emotional closeness so powerful. Sometimes the emotional bond can cause more problems than anything physical ever could. You can explain a mistake. You can justify a poor decision. But explaining why another person became your first choice for comfort, that's much harder. And Tomas needs to understand that. I don't blame him for needing support. Everyone needs someone sometimes. But he needs to be careful that support doesn't turn into dependence. There's a big difference between saying, I need someone to talk to, and saying, I can't get through this without you. The first one is healthy. The second one can become dangerous. And Eva needs to protect herself too. She can listen. She can care. She can offer advice. But she cannot become responsible for fixing Tomas's life. That's not her job. And if she gets too emotionally involved, she could end up caught in problems that started long before she entered the picture. That's where things could get messy. Eva already has her own complicated emotional world. Recent developments have also involved difficult conversations around her and Isaiah.so. Now Tomas leaning on her could add another layer to everything she's already dealing with. And there's something else about Eva that I find interesting. The person who listens often becomes the person who knows the most. Think about it. Tomas tells Eva something. Someone else tells Eva something. Then another person shares a secret. Suddenly, Eva knows things that other people don't know. And once you have that much information, you become important whether you want to be or not. That's why I would not underestimate Eva right now. She may not be the loudest person in the room. She may not be making the biggest moves. But she could become the person holding pieces of several different stories. And that can be incredibly powerful. Now, let's come back to Dani. Because I don't think her failed search means she is done. Actually, I think the opposite. She may become even more determined. When someone gives you an answer, you can move on. But when someone stops you from getting an answer, you start asking why. And that can make you dig even deeper. Dani could begin watching Andre more closely. She could notice Heather's behavior. She could start wondering who else knows something. And once that happens, people around her may realize she isn't going to let this go. That's where the tension could really explode. Because Dani isn't just searching for a fact. She's searching for the truth about the people around her. And that's personal. If she discovers that someone close to her has been lying, she isn't just going to be angry. She's going to feel betrayed. And betrayal hits differently. You can be angry at an enemy. But when someone you love keeps something from you, you start questioning the entire relationship. That's why Andre's secret is so dangerous. And that's also why Heather getting closer to Dani could be such a huge problem. Imagine Heather becoming the person Dani trusts before Dani learns the truth about Heather. That would be a nightmare. Because Heather could slowly become the person Dani goes to for answers about everyone else. And if that happens, Heather gains exactly what she wants. Influence. But I don't think Dani will stay unaware forever. There are too many clues. Too many strange connections. Too many people behaving differently. And eventually, something is going to slip. Now here's my prediction. I think Heather's biggest problem could be the number of people who are starting to look at her from different directions. Smitty is suspicious. Dani is searching. Andre is afraid. Martin is being pulled into the situation. And other people, including Joey and Randy, are also connected to the growing mystery around Heather. Recent reports suggest Randy is watching Heather, while Joey has received information about her. That means the pressure isn't getting smaller. It's growing. And the more people who start looking into Heather, the harder it becomes for her to keep every story straight. That's the weakness of having too many secrets. Eventually, someone remembers something that doesn't match. Someone asks a question Heather wasn't ready for. Someone compares two conversations. And then the whole thing starts falling apart. But I don't think Heather is going to go down easily. She'll probably fight. She'll probably create another distraction. She may even try to make someone else look guilty. That's how she has survived so far. The bigger issue is whether she can keep doing what she's doing when people no longer believe her. Once trust is gone, it becomes much harder to manipulate others. Smitty might not believe the next story. Dani could doubt the next explanation. Martin might start to wonder what Heather really wants. And Andre might finally realize that staying quiet is worse than telling the truth. That's when Heather's situation becomes more dangerous. As for Tomas and Eva, I think their relationship is going to get more complicated before it becomes clear. Tomas may keep opening up to Eva. Eva may keep supporting him. And someone is going to notice. Maybe Naomi. Maybe someone else. Once they do, the questions will begin. Even if Tomas and Eva never cross a romantic line, others might think they have. In a soap opera, perception can create a scandal on its own. That's why I think their story is worth watching. The real problem might not be whether Tomas and Eva want each other. It could be whether Tomas is starting to rely on Eva too much. That is a different issue entirely. Then there's Dani. I think she is closer to the truth than she realizes. Her search might have stopped, but the trail hasn't gone away. It could just be hiding somewhere else. And if Heather is involved with that trail, Dani and Heather could have a serious confrontation eventually. I don't necessarily mean a big argument. Honestly, I'd rather see something more quiet. Two women sitting across from each other. Both know there are secrets. Both know the other isn't telling everything. Dani asks a simple question. Heather gives an answer. Dani doesn't react. She just asks another question. Heather hesitates. That's the moment. Dani knows. Maybe she doesn't know all the facts, but she knows enough. That kind of scene could be powerful. Because secrets don't always blow up. Sometimes they crack slowly. One tiny crack at a time. And I think Heather may be getting close to that first crack. At the same time, Tomas turning to Eva could create an emotional ripple that eventually reaches Naomi. And Smitty's investigation could create another ripple that reaches Heather. Put all that together, and the pressure is coming from every direction. Heather wants control. Tomas wants support. Dani wants answers. These three things can't stay separate forever. Someone is going to lose control. Someone is going to say too much. And someone is going to find out something they weren't supposed to know. My main question is about Heather. How long can she keep manipulating people before someone finally stops acting the way she expects? Or perhaps Dani finds something that changes everything. No matter what happens next, one thing is clear. The people involved are getting closer to the truth. And when that truth finally comes out, someone is going to wish they had stayed silent.